See, the world that refused to load. The world had always been a tapestry of endless possibilities for Orion. From the jagged peaks of snow-capped mountains to the dense, whispering canopies of ancient forests, he had explored it all. His pickaxe, a loyal extension of his will, had chipped away at countless stone walls, revealing veins of glittering ore, and his crafting table had brought forth tools, armor, and the very foundation of his survival. He was a wanderer, a builder, a silent guardian of his own little corner of existence. Today, however, that existence began to fray. It started subtly, as most terrors do. A single block of dirt, precisely where he remembered placing it, simply wasn't there. A minor oversight, he mused, perhaps an unfortunate creeper blast he'd forgotten about, though no crater marred the grass. He filled the void, then continued his work, meticulously expanding his modest underground bunker. Later, a section of the cave wall shimmered, a brief, pixelated distortion, before settling back into its familiar texture. He rubbed his eyes, attributing it to fatigue from a long mining session. The deep, rumbling silence of the earth often played tricks on the mind. But then, the sun, usually a steadfast beacon, flickered, not like a cloud passing, but like a faulty lamp, momentarily winking out before reigniting with a slightly off-kilter hue. Orion emerged from his bunker, his brow furrowed. He scanned the horizon. A distant patch of forest, one he knew well, seemed lighter, less defined, almost transparent. He blinked, and it solidified, but the image of its former ghostly state lingered, unsettling. His unease intensified as he noticed a peculiar silence. The familiar chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, the distant bleating of sheep, all seemed muted. A profound quiet had descended, broken only by the soft thump of his own heavy boots on the grass. Then came the sound that truly chilled him, a faint, high-pitched hum, barely perceptible, not like a distant server struggling to load. He returned to his crafting table, his mind racing. He pulled out a map, unfurling the parchment across the rough wooden surface. As he did, a corner of the map, depicting a small lake near his camp, shimmered and pixelated, then simply vanished from the paper, leaving a blank white triangle. Orion stared, his heart sinking into his stomach. This was no ordinary glitch. This was something far more insidious. He grabbed his best diamond pickaxe, his enchanted sword, and a satchel heavy with essentials. Torches, food, spare blocks of cobblestone, a stack of wood. He looked towards the distant forest, the one that had momentarily faded. A new void had appeared, a jagged, unnatural tear in the fabric of the world, revealing nothing but the infinite, unsettling gray of an unloaded chunk. The hum grew louder, a low, guttural growl that vibrated in his teeth. Orion set off, a grim determination etched on his face. His journey quickly became a desperate race against an invisible foe. The world around him was unraveling. He found a small river, usually teeming with fish, now ending abruptly in midair, its waters cascading into the abyssal void below. Further on, a flock of sheep grazed contentedly, only to suddenly disappear with a silent pop, their wool and meat not even dropping. It was as if they had never been. He reached a small village he frequently traded with. It was a scene of utter desolation. Half of the buildings were gone, sliced clean away, their interiors exposed to the elements. Villagers, usually bustling with purpose, stood frozen, their arms outstretched as if caught mid-gesture, their heads cocked in confusion. One particular villager, a librarian, whose house was now a hollow shell, swayed precariously on a sliver of cobblestone, his emerald eyes wide with uncomprehending terror. He pointed a trembling arm towards the horizon, where more chunks were visibly, horrifyingly dissolving. Blocks melted away like sugar in hot water, revealing the unending gray beneath. The hum intensified, a symphony of destruction. Orion understood the silent message. The source was out there, eating the world, one chunk at a time. He had to find it. He pushed on, traversing treacherous landscapes where the very ground beneath him would occasionally vanish, forcing him to leap across newly formed chasms. He built bridges of cobblestone over yawning abysses that had once been solid plains. He saw a creeper, its fuse lit, stumble over the edge of a dissolving hill, exploding harmlessly into the empty space below, its green dust scattering into nothingness. The eerie spectacle almost made him chuckle, if not for the grim reality of his situation. Night fell, but the stars were veiled by an unnatural, sickly purple haze. Skeletons and zombies still spawned, their forms slightly distorted, their movements jerky and unnatural, as if they too were struggling against the world's dissolution. He fought them with a new ferocity, his mind focused. He noticed that the Endermen, usually skittish and prone to teleportation, were behaving strangely. They would gather at the edge of new voids, their long limbs still, their heads tilted, staring into the abyss with an unnerving stillness, almost as if they understood the terrifying cosmic dance playing out. One even picked up a block from the dissolving edge, then paused, looking not at Orion, but at the ever-expanding emptiness, before blinking away with a mournful whoop. The trail led him eastward, towards a landscape that was already deeply scarred. Forests stood half-formed, their trees lacking foliage on one side. Mountains rose in impossible angles, their peaks simply ceasing to exist. The air grew thick with a faint shimmering dust, like pulverized data, and the hum was now a constant low thrum, vibrating in his very bones. He eventually found the epicenter in a desolate Badlands biome, now twisted beyond recognition. The vibrant orange and red terracotta was replaced by a dull, mottled gray and black, as if the very colors had been leached from the land. In the heart of this corrupted wasteland stood a massive, pulsating anomaly. It was a complex, geometric structure, a chaotic fractal of obsidian, and an unknown, shimmering material that seemed to absorb the light around it. It pulsed with a malevolent energy, its surfaces constantly reconfiguring, and from its core, waves of invisible energy radiated outward, consuming chunks with horrifying efficiency. This was the devourer of worlds, the source of the hum, the very heart of the glitched reality. Orion's hands tightened on his pickaxe. This wasn't a mob to be fought with a sword, nor a natural disaster to be outrun. This was an affront to existence itself. He noticed corrupted mobs, husks with unnaturally glowing eyes and spiders with missing legs that still scuttled unnervingly fast, guarding the perimeter. They were mere extensions of the anomaly, defending their master. He found a small, partially loaded dungeon nearby, miraculously untouched by the worst of the corruption. Inside, among the usual cobwebs and mossy stone, lay a chest. Within it, he found the ancient diagrams, half corrupted, but clear enough for his experienced eye. They spoke of world anchors, powerful devices capable of stabilizing corrupted realities, requiring rare components like a heart of the sea, a nether star, and a new, glistening ore he recognized as stabilite from the glitched Badlands itself. It was a desperate, dangerous task. He meticulously mined the unstable stabilite, fighting off the corrupted husks and spiders that seemed to multiply at the edges of the anomaly. He braved the shifting terrain, his mind focused, his hands moving with practiced speed. He crafted the world anchor on a hastily placed crafting table, the air around him crackling with the anomaly's malevolent energy. The hum was deafening now, his vision blurring from the constant distortion. With the world anchor in hand, a device that pulsed with a warm blue light, he charged, The anomaly reacted, sending waves of raw, corrosive energy towards him, distorting the ground beneath his feet, attempting to throw him into the growing voids. He dodged, he wove, he pushed through the agonizing resistance, his enchanted armor glowing faintly against the oppressive darkness. Finally, he reached the pulsating core. With a shout that was swallowed by the hum, he plunged the world anchor into the shimmering heart of the anomaly. A deafening crack split the air. The hum escalated into a shriek of pure digital agony, then abruptly ceased. The pulsating anomaly shuddered violently, its chaotic geometry twisting and unraveling. It began to shrink, to pixelate, to dissolve into the very same gray void it had created. The corrupted mobs around him shimmered and winked out of existence, leaving behind no trace. Silence. A profound, almost painful silence descended upon the land. The sickening purple haze dissipated, replaced by the familiar deep blue of the Minecraft sky, though the sun was now a brilliant, unmarred white. Orion stood panting, exhausted, his body aching, his eyes stinging from the effort. He looked around. The immediate area was still. The chunk deletion had stopped, but the voids remained. Vast, gaping wounds in the world, stretching to the horizon. They were permanent scars, a stark reminder of what had almost been lost. He turned back, starting the long journey home. The corrupted Badlands was slowly, painfully, regaining some of its natural color. As he walked, he noticed something. A single block of grass where a void had been, flickered into existence, then another, and another, forming a tiny, perfect patch. The world wasn't rebuilding itself instantly, but the process had begun. It would be an eternity, block by painstaking block, but it had begun. He eventually found the librarian villager, still swaying on his small patch of cobblestone, staring into the void where his home once stood. But now, a small, vibrant sapling had sprouted near his feet, stretching towards the sunlight. The villager looked at the sapling, then at Orion, a flicker of something resembling hope in his emerald eyes. A distant Enderman, its tall frame silhouetted against the setting sun, paused its teleportation, looking at Orion, then at the slowly regenerating landscape, before blinking away into the twilight. Orion knew his days of simply wandering were over. The world had shown its fragility, its vulnerability. He reached for his pickaxe, not to mine for fortune, but to begin filling the voids, to bridge the gaps, to help stitch reality back together, one block at a time. The adventure was not over. It had merely transformed. His purpose was now clearer than the deepest diamond mine: to build, to protect, to mend the broken world that had once refused to load,